Okay, so this is my video presentation on the 4 short films I was a part of for the Film Language and Technology unit. So the first short film was called Unexpected. The first one's all about a man walking down a street, minding his own business, listening to some tunes, when suddenly masked men come out of nowhere and capture him. And so they drag him away, and it looks like they're going to kidnap him, murder him, and he's taken to a house and placed on a chair. But then at the very last moment, you get to find out that it's just all a surprise birthday party, so it's quite comedic. But we thought we'd add an extra twist at the very end to make it even funnier, where the friends realise they've got the wrong person. Moving on to what my role was. My main role was DOP, so I filmed almost all of the footage, and I also helped collect and return all the equipment with the producer. As the DP, I made a storyboard of what to shoot for the short film, along with details of the type of shot, type of music, and inspiration behind it all. So as I was the person looking after the camera, I was very organised in making sure all the batteries were fully charged before filming, and also getting just used to the camera. Moving on to the inspiration for the film, I'd say one of the main ones was the first scene of the man walking down the street in our film. That was inspired by the coffee run scene in Baby Driver. And then another inspiration that can go along with that is the Peter Parker evil dance scene in Spider-Man 3. Moving on to what went well, we were really lucky with the location because we could use our producer's flat to film the surprise birthday party, and the producer also spoke to nearby neighbours so they wouldn't be alarmed by us filming outside. What I also think went well was the contrast between the 2 music tracks. I thought that was really cool. With the specific film skill being visual language, I felt like I had quite an important role to fulfill. And I think some angles were filmed well. There was this one clip where I had the camera look up towards the kidnapper to just emphasise that he's in a more powerful position than the protagonist. Moving on to what didn't go so well, I did find it really hard keeping the camera steady whenever I had to film the protagonist walking, and it's so hard to keep it smooth. Some of the shots were so shaky that they didn't actually make it in the final edit, so I definitely need to improve on that. Another issue was time, as the whole group wasn't available apart from only 2 Fridays, so we were very short for time. Another issue was that we had no professional external actors, so if there was a next time, I would try and get the story finalised more quickly to just get going with the rest of the film. I would also try to have the group more focused on the project and try and force more available days for us all to be there. Okay, so moving on to film 2, this one was called The Promise. The idea was that there were 2 detectives, PC Palmer and PC Adams, that worked closely together, and Adams had committed a crime which Palmer had witnessed. And the promise is based around Palmer promising Adams to cover up the crime. The film is set in an interrogation room where a lieutenant is interrogating Palmer about the murder of a girl. Palmer tries to cover up what Adams has done for most of the film, but the audience sees him have flashbacks of what he actually did. So he gets rejected in the proposal and then murders her in anger, with Palmer left in shock to clean up this mess. And then the audience comes to understand why the lieutenant is being so passionate about this interrogation, about this case, and he then reveals that the murdered girl was his sister. And so, feeling guilty, Palmer finally reveals what Adams had done at the end, breaking his promise to Adams. Okay, so moving on to the roles in the film. So I wanted to branch out to different individuals and try and get to know what it's like working with other people. While we were discussing the idea for this film, our initial producer and director both pulled out, which sort of threw us off a bit and sort of delayed everything really. To save the group, I sort of took the role of director. I believed that we could have a good story here. After we all agreed on the idea of an interrogation, I worked on the story for a whole weekend, for hours. Then on the shoot day, I also ended up being the DP. Other crew members had to act, because unfortunately we didn't have external actors. I also became co-editor as I worked into many late nights with the actual editor. In terms of preparing for the role, I prepared each shot with other crew members placing masking tape on the floor for where the tripod will go. I also made sure that I knew the story well, because I needed to be the one that would direct it, so I needed to understand the story the most, because I knew I'd gone for quite a complex story here. And then we also made sure that we were okay to film in the outside areas that we chose, which was in Greenwich. Okay, in terms of inspiration for this film, the Casino Royale opening scene, we took inspiration from that because in that scene it jumps between high key and low key lighting, and I thought we could incorporate that between the real time of the interrogation and the flashbacks that Palmer is having. So what went well? The actual setting, we used a large backdrop and a spotlight that I believe worked really well and allowed us to embrace our sort of lighting and mise-en-scene skills. We got into like a really good rhythm of working as a team, which I thought was really good. And we made sure the wires for the lighting were tucked away. The editing was also something that was worked on for a very long time. I spent multiple 6-hour sessions with the editor, ensuring the story looked to be how I had planned. What didn't go so well was when we arrived at the shoot, the XLR cable was unfortunately forgotten. We had a 3-hour delay for when we could start shooting. One of the biggest issues for this film though was the casting, I believe, because we got criticised for it after the screening. Once again due to the lack of organisation, I feel, and the delay of getting the story finished because we had people pull out. We weren't able to find professional actors in time again. However, we were able to use a couple external actors through friends, but unfortunately their ages simply, the two people in the interrogation, their ages simply don't really work for the characters they're meant to be. So what would I do differently next time? To improve next time, I'd make sure to have like better costumes with more qualified actors. I'd maybe try not to make the story as complex because I feel like I stressed way too much on like how to make the story make sense. Okay, so film 3 was called The Plunge. So it's all about a man walking in a park and he begins to eat a banana and the man dislikes the banana and he angrily throws it further up the path. Without realising, an injured guy is sort of walking in the opposite direction and he's holding an eclair in his left hand. And before the man could stop him, the injured guy slips on the banana, throwing the eclair into the air, and the man plunges towards the man as if to save him, but at the last moment he catches the eclair whilst the injured man collapses onto the ground in pain. So moving on to my role, there was a very awkward atmosphere, I have to admit, in my group for this one. It just so happened that there were people who simply didn't get along well. And so I ended up being the director again, though I didn't think I would, and also the writer. And I also ended up being the editor to be able to make the best version of the film because I wanted it to be perfect. I prepared a shot list for the shoot day for every clip we were going to shoot so it could be nice and quick and just get going with it. We also made sure it was okay to film in the park by calling the local council. The inspiration for this film, it was inspired by the old-fashioned slapstick comedies. There's like no speech, and I feel like this was very similar in that way. It's very simplistic with no words but still very effective. We also tried to get shots of the eclair flying in the air, and this was sort of inspired by the Space Odyssey 2001 scene where you see the flying bone. Okay, moving on to what went well, we were also able to film all the footage in one day. As the specified film skill was sound, we made special effort that the sound design was good for this film, and so my editor and I got in contact with a friend who specialises in music production and helped us sort out the music and sound effects. Now moving on to what didn't go so well. Well, the film shoot itself was very stressful, simply because of a clash between people within the crew. What also made it stressful was that there was barely any daylight hours, and it was the only day where everyone was available. The 180-degree rule was completely slaughtered. Like, we broke it millions of times, and even after all the editing, the colour grading was clearly not consistent, which really bugs me still now. So I did learn a lot from this film, actually. Okay, finally, film 4 was, we called it Toast. This was also a very simplistic idea. You see a man in the year 2019 and he's listening to music and making breakfast, and he puts some bread in the toaster and then the bread doesn't pop back up, and when he fiddles inside of the toaster with a knife, he gets electrocuted and teleported back in time to the year 1893. And the guy teleports into a shed where he finds the inventor, and the inventor looks at him shocked and then triumphs that his supposed time machine has worked. The role I had in this film was being a producer and sound. Quite an obvious inspiration for this film was Back to the Future, you know, sort of teleportations. Moving on to what went well, we were able to film all the footage in one day. None of the batteries were out of charge. I made sure they were all fully charged. The negative side of this film, the production design definitely could have been improved. The shed did not look old enough. I mean, I'm pretty sure there was an electric drill in the back. Next time, for improving, I would obviously definitely get external actors. This has been a reoccurring problem for all the films. Maybe the story could be developed a bit further, and I would also definitely improve the production design effort. And yeah, overall I think these 4 films have been brilliant for me to learn a lot of different things, and it's just been a brilliant experience. And yeah, that is it. Thank you for watching.